Today I'm speaking with the fabulous Nikki Hind. Nikki is Australia's first legally blind fashion designer and the founder of Her Fashion Blind Grit, her fashion label Blind Grit. Nikki is also the fashion editor for WB40, Women Beyond 40 magazine, and she is a disability and inclusion advisor and media consultant. As the fashion editor of WB40, Nikki's passion is to change the image around inclusion of disabled people and designers in the fashion industry. Writing features on inclusive fashion and why representation of the disability community matters, Nikki is making a powerful impact on how disabled women see themselves, but also changing the narrative on how mainstream media represents disability and fashion. A few words missing there, so I ad-libbed halfway through. Isn't that exciting? And I'll tell you a little bit in this fabulous series of the recipients of the National Awards for Disability Leadership. I'll let you know about the award that Nikki has received. Nikki is the recipient of the Social Impact Award in the National Awards for Disability Leadership. This award is for someone who achieves visibility of disabled people by using mainstream or social media or other digital interfaces. Welcome, Nikki. Thanks so much for making time for us today. It's fantastic to catch up.
It is lovely to catch up, and thank you. That it's kind of my dream award-winning category. That it's certainly what I aim to do.
That's fantastic. That's so fantastic. What do you aim to do? How has your work evolved? You know, why are you doing what you're doing? How did it end up being this?
Yeah, and it is quite different from how it started. I started designing after not being able to find the kind of work I wanted after losing my vision in my early to mid 30s. That idea of pursuing a dream that I had previously thought was terribly impractical. So I started with that, the idea of wanting to just be a fashion designer, give it a go. And then as I kind of went through the process, looking around at who were the other blind fashion designers in Australia, there weren't any. In the world, there's a couple. And then further as to people who live with disability being designers, not that many at all. So it just got me looking. I guess it's kind of in your face. And I think whether you're disabled or whether you're able-bodied, you don't necessarily see it, even though it's in your face, that people who live with disability are not at all well represented within the fashion industry. And back when I started in 2015, even less so. So it became, I guess, more about, the excitement of using the platform of fashion to help build the awareness of the value and potential that, frankly, society's missing out on when not embracing and utilising those who live with disability.
You've more recently been doing a lot of work around something called inclusive fashion. What does that mean? What's that about?
And I actually wrote an article on it last year because you hear it all the time, inclusive fashion. And when I did some research on what it is, what are the parameters, what's the definition, there isn't one. There is no definition of inclusive fashion. And it was amusing. It was anything from models, female models not shaving their underarm hair.
Okay.
If you feature that, you're apparently being inclusive. I think it became very much a clickbait phrase, and something that labels and designers and magazines felt they should be doing. They should be inclusive in fashion, but there was really, there was no definition or parameters around it, and therefore no way to measure it, no way to hold brands accountable, or just a confusing, I guess, clickbait term to me. So, I mean, there's, so far as disability in fashion, I think there are kind of two separate things that we see a lot. We see what would be termed as adaptive clothing, and then people talk about inclusive fashion. I personally, my view of the future of fashion is around inclusive fashion, which to me is where I describe it as like having two bodies of water, a big wide river that's the fashion industry that's been going a long time, has not really changed that much since the Industrial Revolution, frankly. Big river, and next to it you've got, you know, this little stream of adaptive or disability fashion, and it looks quite different. You know, it's clothing that tends to come from more of a medical model, which of course with numerous disabilities is really important. You need your clothing to be medically safe and comfortable for you. But it's not along the same, that's not fashion, that's clothing. And when you look at why people wear fashion, what people love about fashion, it's very rarely to do with comfort. You know, the old thing of, you know, suffer for fashion. And, you know, the research supports that people with disability will be uncomfortable and even, you know, a little bit unsafe if they're trying to be fashionable, and that there's really there's really not much of a crossover, that clothing that has been made specifically for people who live with disability, and it's very often people who are wheelchair users. That tends to be the very strong perception of who designers are designing for when they're designing adaptive fashion, that it doesn't look like what everyone else is wearing. And I don't see that as desirable, and I don't really see it as something that can grow. So there's that, yeah, adaptive fashion, which there's certainly important elements of it around health and, you know, physical comfort and safety. But I would strongly argue that you can include some of those elements in the kind of fashion that everybody wears. Because if you're talking about a wheelchair user, how many hours of the day are people sitting anyway? I know there are other things to take into consideration, but that idea of what's good for disability is good for everyone. If you're designing around what's comfortable and safe for people who use wheelchairs, or for someone with cerebral palsy, or for someone with autism, or for someone who's blind like myself, they're probably only going to be really handy, good, useful things for an able-bodied person to have in their garment. So my ideal is that the adaptive fashion kind of, that it all come into this one big stream. And of course, when water merges, you can't tell, you know, which is what. My ideal is that the future of inclusive fashion, it all just looks like fabulous fashion that has come along through people who live with disability being in decision-making positions, being designers themselves, being stylists, being photographers, being makeup artists, being in consultant roles for industry shows, being fashion editors for magazines, being teachers at fashion schools, all these things, because what it will bring along is amazing, innovative, exciting, new fashion ideals and ideas that are wonderful and exciting for everybody. So that's my vision, and that's how I see the difference between adaptive fashion and inclusive fashion.
Thank you. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I know that a couple of years ago you were part of a big extravaganza that was part of Melbourne Fashion Week as a designer that Carly Findlay was part of putting together or was behind. And in some ways, that was almost bursting onto the scene. You know, there were disabled models. There was you as a blind fashion designer. The people behind the scenes, all of the tech and the supporters you were just outlining then were disabled people, a crew. What sort of challenges have you and barriers have you come across in this work in getting into that mainstream fashion space? Um, Not just as a disabled person, but as a bunch of disabled people, and then
Mm.
through that, actually the acceptance of this sense of inclusion. What have been some of the barriers and the challenges that you've come across?
Yeah, it's amazing, really, because in some respects it feels like it's changed quite a bit since 2016, 17, and then other times when I'm doing things, I think, wow, there's still almost no movement. Just before I came to speak with you today, I was in a meeting with the wonderful Luke Dean from Afterpay Australian Fashion Week, because last year and this year, myself and brilliant Lisa Cox have been doing consulting work with them. So, you know, that's one thing I'm hugely excited about. That's the kind of thing I so want to see. And this year I had the opportunity to write the definition of what an Afterpay Australian Fashion Week, an inclusive Afterpay Australian Fashion Week looked like. So, and before I got on this, in this interview with you, I was speaking with Luke and just looking at, I mean, that I'm reading this from the computer in front of me. Ivan Bart, who is the international president of IMG Models and Fashion, who are the huge international organisation who run the fashion weeks all around the world, he had a quote from back in 2017, and he says, "I truly understand that when kids open up their fashion magazine for the first time, what they see needs to reflect who they are." And which is really interesting that he said it back then. And there was no particular mention of people with disability in the rest of the article. But that is so important. And it's interesting that people with disability were left out then. And on the whole, they're still left out now. And on his, you know, in his profile with what he does as president of IMG, he has, through fashion imagery, we can affect social change, which is something I strongly believe. It's you know, that it is the best platform, probably along with the music industry, that's a good platform too. But fashion is, you know, the social mirror of what's not only acceptable, but desirable in particular, valuable and desirable in particular. So it is probably our most powerful platform for affecting social change. So he's acknowledged that, and he also says what is visual reflects who we are, and he has hashtag inclusion, hashtag evolution. So these are all very good things that he's got up there. However, you know, when I look on a lot of, I was then researching, you know, the percentage of disabled models on international catwalks, the percentage of disabled models in casting agencies. I've been researching so hard for days, and it comes up with random, you know, in the Canary Islands, there were 20 models, or like it just doesn't. And, you know, even researching disabled IMG models, and it just doesn't come up. I know they have some, I do know they have some. But it's really interesting because those things that he said, and he are very aligned with how I feel. I just don't see it. I don't see it come through still. And I guess when you ask me what is so hard, I think, and again, I wrote about this with inclusive fashion. Fashion is innately exclusive. So how do you make something exclusive genuinely inclusive? Because its power does in fact come from that exclusivity and that desirability. So you can't dismantle that. It loses its power. And it's very, I find that it's very, you know, part of that being that platform of desirability, it's very competitive and very protective. And yeah, it's just, it can be still, it suffers from being traditional, which is funny because fashion is all about what is new. You know, the whole idea of fashion is shock me with something new. What's new? What's new? What's new?
It's almost a you know, constant contradiction of its own existence.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, so I think that's you know, that's one of the hardest things, that the people who hold the key positions, they're, well, and there's just so much, there's a lot of money at stake with the big brands, and, you know, just, and it's all about image, and just kind of even tweaking that image a little bit can seem terrifying to,
Yes.
you know, some of the big brands and the big agencies and the big shows, because it feels like so much is riding on it. So it's that, it's that getting, and it needs to be aspirational, you know, it needs to be desirable, it needs to be aspirational, and the chicken before the egg thing of how do you get that beautiful aspirational work to show people on a world stage, look, this is what we can do, put it on your world stage. How do you get it if no one will let you have it on the world stage? But look, it is balancing out, it is getting there.
So
but
where
it's
to
that
next
chicken
then
and egg.
for, yeah, where to next then for Nikki Hind? If, you know, if that's the big goal, where to next?
Well, I would like to, I certainly really love what I'm doing with Afterpay. That feels really important to me because Afterpay also do Fashion Week in New York, and they're moving into other countries as well. So I would love to have that definition more embedded in the fashion weeks around the world. I genuinely think that's so important. I think I must be a bit of a systems person, and I would love to be able to be really instrumental in the measuring and accountability. And so as when people research what percentage of disabled models were on catwalks in 5 years' time, there will actually be something worthwhile to read about that, the how many, the how, the why, the what's in the way, and who they are, rather than there's, yeah, that's what I'd like to see, because I feel when you define and measure and hold accountable, that's when you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. That's when you can actually build on what you've got and keep moving forward, rather than risk falling off the radar or keeping on going back to the start.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Visibility. Hey, we keep talking about it. Visibility. In some ways,
The
that's what the awards
blind
are
girl's all about visibility.
about. Indeed. I always like to, we're just about out of time, Nikki. These always go so fast. I always like to finish up on a particular question with everybody, which is, who is a leader you admire and why?
Well, Christina, you're sitting there in front of me, I have to say.
Oh, you can't have me. That's cheating.
Is it?
Got to be somebody else. Yeah. You'll make me blush. You'll make me blush. Yeah.
Well, it is you, all right. But if I have to have another one as well, it is, because what you've done with yeah, it is you. So there you go. But if I have to choose another one, I would, in my realm of experience and what I'm aiming for and what I've been able to achieve, I would have to say Luke Dean. He's just because, you know, I feel for the disability community to be able to get into the decision-making positions and to have the input and influence to have some genuine representation and be able to show their awesome, innovative value, you do need the people who have been installed there in those decision-making positions for 10, 20, whatever years, the people with all the knowledge, all the contacts, you need them to get it and to back you and to work with you and to stand beside you and to fight for you. And I haven't found many of really strong voices to stand up with me along the way. And he is one. He really is. And he's a very quiet leader. Yeah, and he is quite my inclusive fashion hero.
Fantastic. Oh, it's been so wonderful to catch up with you today, Nikki Hind. Thanks for making time.
You are so welcome. Can I show you the back of my top? Because this is from the new
can.
collection.
I was going to congratulate you once again on receiving the Social Impact Award in the National Awards for Disability Leadership. Just stand up a little bit there, Nikki. Turn around and stand slightly. And there it is. Oh, it's a blind grit thingy. Yay!
We had our photo shoot cut short by COVID on the weekend, but there you go. That's
fantastic. Oh, congratulations on the new collection, which is out shortly, and I know that. And on receiving the Social Impact Award in the National Awards for Disability Leadership. It is a fantastic thing to see you.
Thank you so much.